We are at the site of the Battle of Osawatomie that occurred on August 30th, 1856, and this was one of the major battles in the Bleeding Kansas era that led up to the Civil War. And I am going to maintain that the Civil War actually began in southeast Kansas. Hey everybody, I'm Julian Gower and this is Inspecting History, and on this channel we go visit historical sites around the Kansas-Missouri border to learn the history that they can teach us. And today we are learning all about the Battle of Osawatomie, Kansas. But before we get into it, let's get some background. In 1854, Kansas became a territory of the United States. The Missouri Compromise of 1821 stated that no state would enter the Union north of the 36th parallel as a slave state. If Kansas had entered the Union as a free state, the balance of power would have been in the favor of the abolitionists. And this was a huge topic during that time. Settlers were pouring west in search of a better life, and they brought with them the question of slavery. Pro-slavery citizens felt their livelihood was being threatened, and anti-slavery citizens, abolitionists, felt that slavery was immoral. It was becoming increasingly difficult for both parties to coexist. The government, instead of making a decision on Kansas's slave status, passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, leaving it up to the citizens of the Kansas Territory to decide if that state would be free or a slave state. Well, what happened was there was a huge influx of abolitionists from the north as well as pro-slavery settlers coming in from Missouri and other southern states. And those two groups were vying for power to make Kansas either a free or a slave state. Bleeding Kansas refers to the years between 1854 and the start of the Civil War in 1861, when there was major conflict here on the Kansas-Missouri border. Each side raided, burned towns, killed each other, and caused a lot of conflict in the area. Osawatomie and John Brown were at the center of this conflict. John Brown was a staunch abolitionist who came to Kansas in 1855 because of this conflict. 5 of his sons were already here in Osawatomie, as well as his sister and his brother-in-law, and it was in her cabin that he lived while he was here. And this is where the Battle of Osawatomie took place on August 30th, 1856, between 250 pro-slavery militia led by John Reed and 30 Free State men led by John Brown. This park goes in a big oval, and we started down there by the statue of John Brown. And that building in front of us, that houses the Adair Cabin, and that was John Brown's sister's home, and he lived there while he was in Osawatomie. And that is why John Reed brought his militia here to get John Brown. Brown and his supporters were causing a lot of ruckus for the pro-slavery settlers. In May, pro-slavery men attacked the town of Lawrence. Brown, in retaliation, attacked a pro-slavery settlement at Pottawatomie Creek, Kansas, killing 5 men. This attack on Osawatomie was yet another attack in retaliation for all those other attacks, so you can see how it's escalating here. The front part of this park was where pro-slavery militia gathered and where the first shots were fired towards the Free Staters. The pro-slavery militia, they were on horseback, but those horses, they weren't trained for combat, and the animals threw the riders off. Reed's men had to momentarily retreat before they once again charged towards the Free Staters. John Brown's plan was to lure the pro-slavery militia away from Osawatomie because he knew they would raid and burn the town if they had the chance. So they began to fall backwards towards the bank of the Maurice-Decine River. Trains and bridges will turn me into a 5-year-old. If it's a train, I have to watch it, and if it's a bridge, I have to cross it. So I was really excited to see this little tiny bridge over this little tiny creek. and I'm really enjoying walking around and learning about this battle. You know, Osawatomie is a very interesting town. We've already visited Asylum Bridge and the Old State Mental Hospital, and next we're going to go inside that Adair Cabin, and then, yes, there's more. Then we are going to go check out some of the other historical sites around town. I hope you will join me for that, and if you're liking this video and learning something, go ahead and hit that like button because it does help out my little bitty channel greatly with the YouTube algorithm. This is where Reed set up his cannons and snipers, and then the rest of his militia pushed towards the Free Staters, who had fled across the river to regroup and wait for the pro-slavery militia to follow and attack. But they didn't follow them, they didn't pursue, and they didn't attack. Instead, they did what John Brown feared, and they entered the town and raided and burned all but 3 buildings, and then they left. They just left and they just went home. All in all, 6 Free Staters and 2 pro-slavery men died in the battle, including Brown's son, Frederick. Brown was reported to say afterwards, "God sees it. I have only a short time to live, only one death to die, and I will die fighting for his cause. There will be no more peace in this land until slavery is done for. I will give them something else to do than extend slave territory. I will carry this war into Africa." Afterwards, John Brown was known as Osawatomie Brown. He left Kansas and would go on to attack Harper's Ferry in West Virginia on October 16, 1859. He was attempting to secure weapons and arm the slaves, hoping to start a rebellion across the South. He was captured, tried, and executed on December 2nd, 1859, but just like the inscription under his statue says, John Brown of Kansas, he dared begin, he lost, but losing won. John Brown was just one of the many abolitionists in Kansas, and we'll be learning about those men and women on this channel in future videos, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss their stories. And next we are headed over to that building right there. That is the Adair Cabin, and if you'd like to see that, go ahead and click on the link that is shown here on the screen. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me and going on this adventure. I will see you all next week.